Hi there and welcome. In this video we're going to examine what is the real main issue governing the Irish Protocol and why it has more to do with the US than perhaps it does with the EU. And for the elephant in the room, why isn't it being addressed? Who knows? But could it be that politicking has soared to such new levels? I think you might be able to make your own mind up after this one. Now, we've all heard of the term a Swiss-style veterinary agreement, and we are, after all, been told by the EU that this would solve the problems with the Irish Protocol almost immediately, and I think we're all agreed it would solve the problems of the Irish Protocol. All that it would require is for the UK to maintain the same sanitary and phytosanitary, the SBS rules to you and I, it has had in place for decades. So there would be the same rules that apply to the current Swiss arrangement on exported foods to the EU, with the caveat that Switzerland can appeal to the WTO if they feel aggrieved. So what's the problem? Well, I mean, what's the real problem? Let's get into that, shall we? And to remind you all, I've included full factual evidence of all the statements I'm going to make in this video in the description below. The UK has been importing and exporting raw, processed and even live animals to and from the EU for decades. And let's face it, not much has changed. In fact, absolutely nothing has changed in the handling of such food from farms to dinner plates in the last 6 months. So why the problem? What's the big problem here? The problem is that the UK has been very, very specific in its position on this point and have refused to sign an agreement that stipulates it will continue with these procedures. Now, you may ask yourself, why would the UK decide to change what she's been doing for decades? I mean, at first glance to you and me, it seems stupid, right? Well, yes and no. If the UK sees the EU as our main trading partner in the future, then to maintain those SBS rules is the way to go. But there's a problem with this, and it has nothing to do with the EU, in effect. It has to do with other trade deals, and both the EU and the UK know this. Furthermore, the EU now know beyond all doubt that the UK is desperately in need of those new deals, and they don't swallow the media BS that everybody else does. You see, if the UK maintains that position, it could jeopardize, our position with the SBS, it could jeopardize future trade negotiations with other countries, especially the US. And let's be very clear, that's what the UK wants. They want that US trade deal. And to give you a prime example of this, one only has to look at the Australian trade deal. You see, if the UK agrees to follow the SBS rules she has followed for years, then the Australian deal would be sunk. But let's leave that one aside for the moment. The big prize is the US trade deal. And to understand that, you simply have to be aware of just two things. What do they have that we do not and want? And what does the UK have that they do not and also want? Nothing more complicated than that. It's very simple. Now, I'm going to go back to the Priti Patel had to backtrack on our comment that should the Republic of Ireland get in the way, or so to speak, of the Brexit deal, then the UK could blockade food supply to Ireland from the UK, so all the Irish would have to play ball. Now, the idea is not as far-fetched as you may think. The problem with the hypothesis is that the Republic of Ireland, just like the US, doesn't need the UK to feed herself, because the Republic of Ireland is basically self-sufficient with regards to food supply and a number of other areas. In contrast, the UK is not self-sufficient, as we can all see, is heavily dependent on importing foods. In fact, the UK imports 45% of our food requirement, And ironically, it's Ireland that supplies most of it. So, just for Priti Patel's information, it's not the other way around. But more worryingly for the UK is that this dependency is growing, it's not falling. So why would the UK not simply go along with that SBS agreement? Well, it's to do with the US. More specifically, but very definitely, the prospect of a US trade deal that is creating the stumbling block. Why? Because the word on the street is quite clear. America will demand in any trade deal it does, and it'll require those SBS to be dropped. It'll require the UK to diverge from the EU and the UK's current SBS rules. End of. In other words, the UK will be bound by the rules of the US and not by the EU's, let alone her own, which, let's face it, she is a lot more familiar with. This, and basically only this, is what is making it more difficult for the UK to mitigate the disruption in Northern Ireland, and number 10 has refused to maintain this alignment to the SBS rules that she has used for decades. However, the Irish government is in the UK's corner on this one. The Irish know that they have more influence in the political arena in the US than the UK. Now, before people jump down my neck, it's not only because of the power of the Irish lobby, it's because of any threat to peace directly affects almost every single US company in the tech, in the pharma, in avionics, and the service industry. Check out your Viagra, see where it's made. Okay? Check out your Intel chip, see where it's made. That list goes on and on and on. Now, many of you may not be aware, but Ireland has the who's who of the globe's major players, and those players have huge influence in Washington. I'm not talking here about simply the tax dodges, I'm talking about those companies I was reeling off there. So a threat to their business prosperity is also a threat to the American economy. Washington is being lobbied to create political space for the UK to the benefit of Northern Ireland by the Republic of Ireland. Now, Biden has two choices here. A, he can publicly remove divergence on food hygiene as a precondition for a trade deal with the UK. Or, and a hell of a lot more drastic an approach would be to B, rule out any trade deal with the UK in this presidential term, which, by the way, would coincide with the protocol consent in 2024, and thus opening the door to a temporary EU-UK SBS alignment. But such an announcement would definitely hurt number 10, and Biden would also find it difficult to capitalize on that type of cooperation. You see, though option B sounds drastic, it's actually very close to the truth anyway, as there is no way in hell there'll be any trade deal between the two countries within that time frame. It's just not going to happen. But more importantly, it would not stop negotiations continuing and thereby just giving some breathing space to the EU and the UK, and indeed the US. However, Johnson scuppered that prospect and has basically told the EU to stuff their market. Johnson is playing poker at the biggest stakes game the world has ever known or is likely to ever witness again. As soon as Johnson signed the Aussie deal, red warning signs were created and bells started ringing, following by screeching sirens all over the EU. The EU know that the UK needs food. They know that Johnson's government have made a policy decision to throw the farming and fishing industry under a bus. Despite the bluster, Patrick Minford, the economics Brexit professor, made that point quite clearly in his Brexit papers. Of course, he didn't expect the UK to throw the services industry into a small life raft, but he did expect to throw fishing and agriculture under the bus. Now, the Aussies need very little of the manufactured goods that the UK has to offer. The UK, on the other hand, may be able to benefit from cheaper food production at the expense of both EU and UK farmers. But as we all know, Australian standards are not as high as those of the existing rules in the UK. Now, by doing this, the UK thinks that this will enable the negotiators to engage with the Americans quicker than they could otherwise. This is stupid. This is just stupid. The problem with that, there are two. One is that Joe Biden would be committing political suicide and possibly irreparable damage to the Democratic Party if he does not support the Republic of Ireland's stance. And second, Nancy Pelosi. She's been crystal clear that nothing's going to happen if the UK screws around with the Good Friday Agreement. It'll get blocked. But the UK's decision to prioritise regulatory flexibility for Great Britain and the ability to strike new free trade agreements over, continued economic integration with the EU created a problem that, quite frankly, Westminster did not fully appreciate and is not able to handle. The Irish community in the US have already begun to bring the various organisations back under the one single umbrella. And lest anybody forget, their vote is primarily amongst high turnout middle class voters. If they vote en bloc, as they once did in the past, it would be extremely difficult for a person to occupy the Oval Office without their support. Though you may think that's hard, 1 in every 3 presidents of the United States claims Irish descent. What are we to do? Thanks for listening and see you on the next one.